We have to use an analogy because for many, even one human lifespan is hard to comprehend, right? We're talking about thousands of human lifespans that undergirded the evolutionary journey of our species since our mitochondrial grandmother 1.8 million years ago in East Africa. So imagine here the human movie is broken down into 100 minutes, okay? We've got it, it's on Netflix, so we can see our time bar up there, and we can fast forward 1 minute, right? At this opening minute, it's actually pretty cool. Something really exciting happens. Our Australopithecine ancestors, from which Homo erectus, our genus that everyone is descended from in this room, our Homo erectus ancestors evolved and split from the Australopithecines that were essentially chimpanzees from the waist up. They had the functional morphology of a chimp. They had the size of a brain of a chimp. But from the waist down, they could walk facultatively biped. So they were a little bit different than chimps. There was a split. Some of them stayed in the trees. Others went to the ground. And in that first minute, some really radical social experiments begin to allow Homo erectus to not only to survive, but to thrive. The camp came into existence here. A camp you can see in the few hunter-gatherer foragers that still exist on this planet. A camp is a coalition of individuals, adults, typically between 20 and 35 adults. They work together in the shared project of survival and reproduction. That is what they do. And to do that, they do a thing called CCP. They share their resources together. So some go out and forage, some go out and hunt. When they come back, they distribute these equally amongst the camp. So already you see an incredible moral insight and an incredible moral evolution right there. And it was the first time it got embedded into our DNA. It was, if you're part of our camp, we will share resources together. Now, with every innovation, though, there's a flip side to the moral coin. And that meant that there's a kind of tyranny to the cousins. If you don't adhere to our social norms in this camp, you will be excommunicated. And what excommunication means if you're in that size of a camp is you're dead, right? So there was a flip side to that coin. Now, let's fast forward all the way to minute 84 in the movie. Now, you would have needed a David Attenborough to spice up this movie, a majority of this movie, because it would really look like a nature documentary. But by the time you get to minute 84, things start really ratcheting up in the movie. In fact, this is when tribes evolve. And when tribes evolve, and you can see it in the archaeological record, when tribes evolve, it means that there was a group of us going beyond the typical 30 kilometers it takes for a human home range to coexist, and going beyond that, maybe 100, 200, 300 kilometers, and sharing with a group of them. Meaning, these goods had behavioral signatures on them, ochre, the way that they flint-knapped the point, that were non-local. And so you know, for the first time that the human mind was grasping with the complexities of working with a completely different group that had a completely different intersubjective belief network. And now I'm going to identify and define what a tribe is. It's an empirical definition, a scientifically robust definition, and it's universal to all humans on the planet. A tribe is an intersubjective belief network, and its primary function is to bootstrap trust among strangers. So this is fascinating because when we think of tribalism today in the 21st century, immediately we think of something negative or pejorative. But the irony here is that we first invented tribalism as a species to bootstrap trust amongst strangers, meaning if you admit the right codex of information, perhaps it's the way you dress, perhaps it's your language, your dialect, sense of humor, any of these, if you admit these things and you confront a stranger that also admits these things, it's like gaining access into a secret society. And we do all these things universally and unconsciously. That happens at minute 84. Now let's fast forward all the way. We're approaching the end of the movie. There's 30 seconds left in the film. And this is where it starts getting almost science fiction-y, because every single slide, some crazy exponent is happening. Here's where sedentary society comes into play. So for 99 minutes of the human story, camp life was most of what humans did, all of our ancestors did. With 30 seconds left, we started becoming sedentary, meaning you start collecting resources together in one spot, and you start defending it. And this is where, in terms of political organization, you start seeing tyranny at mass scale, because what you need to do to defend sedentary resources is to defend it with an organized military. And that is basically the story of the past 5,000 years as this has been bootstrapping up. But it's also the story of when mismatch, and this is a very important term, I'm going to define it cleanly in a few slides, where evolutionary mismatch takes root because we start deviating from the previous ways we were living, and whenever that happens, bad things can happen. To the point where, at its best, most clear expression, evolutionary mismatch, I think, occurred in turning our social pattern into the McDonald's of social patterns. This is the nuclear, quote-unquote, nuclear family. One thing I want you to leave from this talk today is the idea that there is no such thing as a nuclear family. The smallest unit, the smallest nuclear unit in Homo sapiens for 99 minutes of the movie was the nuclear camp. It was never the nuclear family. But the Levitt brothers wanted to profit off of a lot of vets coming back from World War II, and they invented the suburbs. We'll talk about that in a minute. And that's where I think evolutionary mismatch comes to bear socially today. And then in the last seconds of the movie, you have 5 billion people gaining access to X, Twitter, online, and you wonder why we're in this midst of chaos between intersubjective belief networks.